G'day guys, Matt here from Not in the Manual. Today's video is just going to be on battery degradation. We're going to take a look at my Tesla Model Y that's 1 year old now, and I've got 22,000 kilometers on it. So we're going to look at the battery stats for my car, but I also want to cover some basics of the LFP battery and just disguise some things there of how the batteries work. Really basic, guys, and talk a little bit about what happens during degradation and what degradation is. Now, it's not going to be super technical, but I at least want you guys to have a bit of a basic knowledge just to understand what's going on inside the cells that are used in this car. Now, for those of you that don't want to sit through a longer video, we can just run through some degradation figures here now if that's all you're after. So this is my Tesla Model Y. It's a rear wheel drive with the 60 kilowatt hour CATL LFP battery with prismatic cells. Now this has started off with 435 kilometers of range. The car now has 422, 423. It varies a little bit. So we've got a range loss of about 12 kilometers. So that is 2.75% based on the range alone. Now the range shown in the Teslas is purely based off a fixed consumption figure. So that doesn't change throughout the lifetime of your car. So it's using that fixed figure. And my attitude's changed a little bit of that. I thought that figure was a bit useless, but it is very good when it comes to battery degradation. Because I've had this car since new and I've been monitoring the battery capacity since new, which I didn't do with my Model 3, but I have done with this car, I could see that 435 kilometer range at 100% state of charge stayed the same for a while the battery was settling in, even though I could see the battery capacity reducing slightly from like the 60.5 or 60.8 kilowatt hours it had from new. That range didn't decrease. So that is a really good indicator of where your battery health is, because it didn't start changing until after the battery capacity had gone into the settled capacity of the battery as opposed to the installed capacity of the battery. Now, so using that, I've got 2.75% degradation after 22,000 kilometers, which is, you know, pretty much on par with other vehicles with this size LFP battery in them. It's pretty much on par with what I had with my Model 3. And yeah, I think that's the best way of looking at your battery health. Other methods of looking at the battery health are straight out capacity from ScanMyTesla, and using that I had 60.5 kilowatt hours for the installed capacity of the battery, and now I have basically 58.5 kilowatt hours available, or that is the nominal full capacity. So if we work that out, we get 3.3% degradation purely off capacity. Now using the Tessie app, we get 2.2%. Now it is taking readings from the car every so often. Every time you do a charge, it gets some reported data from the car, and it's looking at long-term figures with the car, comparing it to other vehicles, and basically it's saying the health of my battery is 2.2%. Now we'll have a quick look at the app later, but this data is just for those people that don't want to sit through the rest of the video. Now TeslaFi is giving me a 2.62% degradation figure, and it's doing that off range at 100% that the car has reported over time. So we'll have a quick look at TeslaFi as well. And that's it. That's the different methods. So there's 4 different methods there for looking at battery degradation and working out that figure. So I'll just interrupt there and call in from the future here. So right now I'm sitting in my car, roughly 12 months since I made this video. I've got 36,000 kilometers on the car now, as opposed to the 23,000 that I had during the making of the first video. So what I'm doing is combining these two videos. I wasn't able to get that video finished and edited. Things just got too busy and I couldn't finish it off. So what I thought I would do is just overlay here and discuss some stats from the car almost 13,000 kilometers later. So very quickly, the range displayed at 100% at 36,000 as opposed to 23,000 is slightly better. So what I'm seeing now at 100%, 424 kilometers or 425. And if we calculate that out, it comes slightly better degradation than the result for 26,000 or 23,000. I get 2.53%. Now capacity in ScanMyTesla hasn't changed at all. So the nominal full capacity difference is the same. So we're looking at 3.3% degradation calculated in ScanMyTesla. In the Tessie app, we are looking at 36,000. It's actually saying there's a little bit more degradation, 2.64%. Now, the Tessie app polls the battery a little bit. It factors in cars of a similar age. There's a few more things involved, but it is actually showing a worse degradation of 2.64%. And TeslaFi, we're seeing it uses that charge or the range calculation and capacity at 100% state of charge at 2.42% as opposed to the 2.62 at 23,000. So these are the stats at 36,000 kilometers. I'm going to overlay them later when I do a bit more of an in-depth discussion of these different methods for calculating the battery degradation. So one thing I haven't included in either video today is the inbuilt battery health test in the car. Now that basically puts your car out of action for almost 2 days. I haven't had a chance to do that with a level 2 charger here at work. I haven't had the time. I originally did do it for this video and it gave me something like a 90% battery health. It was just some obscure figure. Now I hadn't actually run the battery down to 10% and then charged it back up to 100% a couple of times just to give the BMS a really good look at the full capacity of the battery. Now if you do that a couple of times, you will tend to gain a bit of range on your car. I haven't had a chance to do that. I might just do that as a separate video, doing the battery health test using, used to have to use service mode. Now you just need to go into the menu in the car and go into service and you can run a battery health check there. You don't need to put the car into service mode. So Tesla have made that available. But you can only do it once every 6 months. So when I had that oddball battery health test saying 90%, that meant I couldn't run the test then for another, I think it was either 3 or 6 months. So it sort of meant that I couldn't redo that for that previous video. And the video is actually pretty long, so I didn't want to include that into this edit either. So guys, I'll run that as a separate video. So just thought it might be good in this video to have these stats showing you 13,000 kilometers later, 36,000. So guys, yep, I'll continue on with the previous video. I hope these stats are handy for you. Of course, if you don't really want to do these calculations yourself, you can use the Sexy app by Enhance Auto. So I have the Commander fitted to my car from Enhance Auto. I have the Sexy knob and I use the Sexy buttons as well for convenience functions in the car. But you can also pull a lot of battery stats and car stats from the Commander. It's monitoring all the signals going around in the car, and you can pull very similar data to what you can pull from ScanMyTesla. You can do that with the Sexy app here, and you can see that I can actually show some battery stats there on that main screen. So you can get it to do that degradation calculation for you the same way that I did it from ScanMyTesla, but it's all incorporated within that app there. Battery degradation is a little bit different to looking at your overall battery health, but it is a sign of the capacity loss over time, and that's where the fixed range calculation, the Tesla, can be great. So what that means is anyone can work out the degradation for their car. You don't need ScanMyTesla, you don't need TeslaFi, you don't need the Tessie app. You can just use that as long as you know the initial range your car had when it was charged to 100% from new. For this car, it was 435 kilometers. For my 2021 Model 3 with a 55 kilowatt hour LFP battery, it was 424. Now that car, after 44,000 kilometers, was at 407 kilometers of range when it was at 100%. So I can't remember what that was. It was around the 4 or 5% degradation figure. So I have, my brother-in-law has a Tesla Model 3 that he bought around the same time as I did with mine. So I'll be doing a bit of a battery health check on that car as well, and I'll make a video on that soon. And yeah, I just wanted to have a quick look at my car today and go through that. So for those of you that are just interested in the figures, there you go. So it varies from 2.2% from the Tessie app up to 3.3%, just looking at the raw battery capacity reported in ScanMyTesla, which is reading the capacity data from the car. But remember, that was that installed capacity, which is basically a nominal figure of the car, of the full pack when it was new. So that's not realistic, because that is it's a calculated capacity, it's not the settled capacity, and we'll discuss a couple of those points in a minute. Now, this car has the 60 kilowatt hour CATL LFP battery with prismatic cells, and what we mean by prismatic cells is they're basically a big brick. Now, I've got some good videos from CATL. They've got a great YouTube channel. If you're interested in just looking at some of the processes involved in the manufacturing of batteries, they have some pretty good videos. They have a lot of just marketing sort of talk, but look past that and they've got some really interesting stuff. And yeah, I've sort of had a look at a few of their videos. I'm subscribed to their channel, and they have some really good shorts. I'm going to run through some of the things there, how the battery is constructed. Now, it's not going to be overly technical, but it'll give you an idea of the advantages of this type of cell. And it's much easier to build a pack with these big bricks. You load up a pack with these batteries, with these bricks, and it's called the cell to pack. The battery cell configuration code for the 60 kilowatt hour CATL battery is 108SP1. That means there's 108 of those prismatic cells in series, and they are split up into 4 modules, two 28 cell modules and two 26 cell modules. Now, these are all in series. For the 55 kilowatt hour battery, it's 106 SP1, and what happens is, instead of the 26 cell modules, there's two 25 cell modules. Now, the P1 is basically a designation for parallel. Now, this is one complete pack, so it's called P1. If there were multiple modules in parallel, then it would be P2, P3, P4, or however many modules there are in parallel. So it doesn't really apply for this particular pack. So each of those, the cells themselves are actually higher capacity. So in the 55 kilowatt hour LFP, they were 161 amp hour cells. And in the 60 kilowatt hour battery, they are 172 amp hour cells, roughly. That's what I've been able to find. Okay, so the basics of it are these lithium ions traveling from the lithium iron phosphate material through a separator, through the electrolyte to a graphite anode, and they're stored there, ready to be discharged later on. So that transfer of lithium ions generates the electrons that you use to power the electric motors and everything else in the car. So when these batteries are made, they're made in very long strips. Then those strips are coiled up. So you have the lithium iron phosphate layer. You have a separator, which is what you see in the photos here. You see the white layer there that separates the graphite from the lithium iron phosphate material. That is sort of wound into what they call a jelly roll. You then have the electrodes attached to the end of that, and you have 2 of these jelly rolls that are basically welded to, the electrodes are welded together, and those 2 jelly rolls are then folded and then put into the can shape of the prismatic cell. So this type of cell construction has very little wasted space. So if you're looking down inside, you look at the prismatic cells, and when they then get arranged in the battery, there's very little wasted space. So with a cylindrical cell, you're trying to pack a cylindrical cell into a square box, you end up with these little void spaces. So with a prismatic cell, and the way that the cell is constructed, you end up with very little void space. You still do have a little bit of void space with the radius of the jelly roll there at the ends, but it's not as much as a cylindrical cell arrangement. So that jelly roll then goes into that outer can setup, the prism shape. It then has the cap put on the top, and then you have your terminals, and then it gets filled with an electrolyte. That provides the path for those lithium ions to travel to the anode side of things, to the graphite. So these batteries are filled up with that electrolyte. That electrolyte is a very complex mix of different elements to aid with the transfer of of ions across, and also to try and minimize degradation. Now, as those lithium ions, they travel from the lithium iron phosphate material through to the graphite anode. The graphite anode absorbs those and stores those lithium ions. Now, when they transfer back across during discharge, some of that material, the lithium material and other elements, stay behind in that anode, and they build up over time. Now, what they do is put additives in the electrolytes to minimize that. But on initial cycling of the battery, you do end up with what they call an SEI layer, and that is a solid electrolyte interface. Now, that is just lithium buildup on that graphite anode. So a small thin layer, initial layer, is needed there to aid in the conductivity and the transfer of those ions, but you just don't want too much of that layer to build up. Now, in extreme cases, and this is what happened with a lot of the earlier lithium ion batteries, is you ended up with very large amounts of lithium building up there, and they formed these sort of lithium spikes or build-up called dendrites. So they would actually eventually short out the battery. So it would short out your anode and your cathode, and you would have a catastrophic failure of the battery. You would get thermal runaway from the internal short. Now, with more modern batteries, this is where they have improved. They minimize this absorption or retention of the lithium material in the anode, so that you maximize the transfer or the capacity of the lithium ions to be stored and then returned back across. So that's basically an efficiency of the transfer of the ions. So you want to make sure that the ions that are being sent across to the anode during charge, that pretty much all of them come back and go back across to the lithium iron phosphate side of things, ready to be charged up and sent back across again. So LFP batteries are very efficient at doing that. So that's one of the, that chemistry is very efficient. Now, this electrolyte is super important. Now, a lot of battery manufacturers try to keep that secret, and I have basically there's a paper that I read that I thought was pretty good at simplifying that process, and it's a teardown of a lithium ion an LFP cell that came out of the earlier 55 kilowatt hour batteries that were used in the Model 3. So I think it was a December 2020 car that they took this cell from. Now, they did a teardown report of that. They analyzed the electrolyte, they carved the battery up, they did a lot of electron microscope images of inside the battery, and really it's quite detailed, but it's also a very easy read. So I'll have a link to that, and some of the images I've used here have come from that report, that paper, and I just thought I was pretty impressed with it. It's been, it was an easy read, and it really explained a lot of information about those cells. And you can see how complex it is and how critical it is for the manufacturing to be spot on. For that quality, the cleanliness, it really needs to be spot on when a battery is manufactured. And that's the key. And CATL are one of the biggest battery manufacturers in the world. And I really have a lot of confidence with the battery in this car. And, it's a lot of tech and design engineering goes into that. So the thing is, you can have this great chemistry and everything, but if it's poorly manufactured, cleanliness, any moisture, extra moisture goes in there, that battery, doesn't matter how good you think an LFP battery is, if that production quality is not up, or manufacturing quality isn't up to standard, then that battery isn't going to go the distance. That is really what we don't know. We don't have 10-year-old CATL 60 kilowatt hour batteries that have been in cars. So we don't really know. So over a longer period of time, that's going to be the big test of how well these batteries were manufactured. That's something I can't even tell you. So, but all indicators are that CATL are a very good manufacturer and do quite a good job. So basically, yeah, that electrolyte is the key. And you'll see in that report, that paper that I'm referring to, they analyze the electrolyte as well. They test the performance of that electrolyte against the industry standard electrolyte, and it really outperforms. So I'm not too sure if Tesla had any input in that electrolyte that was used. So that's quite a good paper to read. What the other side of things too, so we've spoken about how the lithium ions travel from the lithium ion phosphate through to the anode, the graphite anode. They're stored there. What can actually happen, the other side of the degradation, so lithium ions remaining and being trapped in the graphite anode is irreversible. So you can't reverse that. Once they're trapped in that anode, there's no going back. That just builds up as this layer there. What can actually happen to the cathode, so your positive side, is you can have oxidization of the cathode. Now this type of degradation on the cathode with the oxidization tends to happen more with elevated voltages. So if we're talking, the nickel cobalt chemistry batteries, they'll charge up to a higher voltage. They'll be at sort of 4.1, 4.2 volts per cell, and higher temperatures and higher voltages on the cathode tend to, cause this oxidization. So that's why with the non-LFP or the nickel cobalt style batteries, it's not good to keep them at 100% state of charge, because that you'll get this oxidization of the cathodes. With an LFP battery, because you're looking at, say, 3.65 volts per cell, roughly at 100% state of charge, that's one of the main reasons why an LFP battery will last longer. Yes, the chemistry has some benefits of lower internal resistance and all these sort of things, but the main benefit is you're not having to charge them to a higher voltage. So all of that affects how many ions travel back and forth, and that's when you get your reduced capacity, and that is degradation. Okay, so just getting back onto the manufacturing of these cells again. So this prismatic cell is made, it gets filled with electrolyte. What actually happens then is that prismatic cell then goes through a series of tests. So that cell, to go into a pack, you can't just grab random cells out and put them in. So they all need to be tested. Now each cell that is built is slightly different. And what CATL would be trying to do, as long as many other battery manufacturers, is do a thing called cell matching. They want to try and just sort these cells out, put very similar performing cells in the pack together, so that it can maximize the load or share the load evenly amongst all the cells, minimize cell imbalance. That's the difference between a well-made battery and a poorly made battery. And I think a lot of these cheaper batteries you see that are in e-bikes, the really, really cheap batteries, these cells are often not matched. And a lot of the issues are when you charge that battery, you have some cells getting up to that 4.2 volts early, and you might have another cell at 3.8. And if it's a poorly made battery with a poorly made or a poorly designed charging system, it's easy to overcharge those cells and take them up past that 4.2 volts, and you put them in a point where the cell is just going to start breaking down, it's going to get hot, and you're going to have a thermal runaway and you're going to have a fire. So the batteries used in EVs are much, much, much higher quality. They have much better quality or more sophisticated battery management systems, and the cells are matched for performance, and there are just so many things. I'm only covering a small fraction of the design of these cells. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of knowledge with that today in this video. I want to try and have, with all of my videos, I want to be able to try and teach you something there. Even if it's an accessory video, I want to teach you something about how that accessory works. What we're going to do now is just go and have a look at some of these apps where I've got my degradation figures from, and we can look through there, and I'll just show you some of those apps and what they show you, and just the benefit of those apps. So I'm going to need to put my glasses on for this because I've been having a lot of vision troubles this year, which is why I've been struggling to get a lot of videos made. And I don't really want to go into all the excuses, but yeah, I have had some vision trouble this year, which has made it very difficult for me. No, we'll start a screen record going here for my iPhone. Okay, and we'll put that up on the screen here. Let's start by looking at the Tessie app. I really like the Tessie app. It's got some really great features here, and you can actually use the Tessie app in place of the Tesla app. So you get most of the functions here with the Tessie app than what you do. I haven't actually tried, I don't think you can do summon, but most other controls you can do. So looking at the Tessie app here, we can click on the battery symbol at the top. Now, I've given the Tessie app a bit more access to my car, so it can actually give me some little average temperature figures for the car right now. It gives me some voltages, gives me current draw, energy, range. It's giving me a few things here. Now, if I click at the top on this little heart symbol here, the Tessie app gathers data and will give me a battery health measurement here based off, you can see the graphs here from measurements that it's taken from my car and compares it against the fleet average here. You can see the blue dots are the capacity feedback that the car has given the Tessie app over time. As it looks at max range, we can look, it's calculated a rough amount of charge cycles here, so 73.4, and we're looking at 5,000 charge cycles plus for an LFP battery before you get down to maybe 80% capacity, but that's still yet to be proven. But at least you can look at that here. We can look at total energy used over the vehicle's lifetime. Now, I've had this Tessie app connected from the beginning, so this is going to be pretty accurate data, and I really enjoy using this app. But that's the battery health thing from the Tessie app. I wanted to show you that there. Now, we can next come along to ScanMyTesla, and we can look here at my Android phone that's connected to ScanMyTesla right now. We can go along and have a look at the battery figures here. Now, this is how I calculated that degradation figure there of 3.3%. Now, that was from ScanMyTesla. We need to go to the battery tab here and go to, where are we? We want full pack when new. You can see this 60.5 kilowatt hours here. Now, that is the installed capacity of the battery, and even for a while there, right back at the beginning, my capacity usable remaining, the figures were all over the place because that the battery just hadn't settled in. I had capacity figures just that seemed like a bit of nonsense. So, and then I even had, for a point there, it was saying my battery was 6% degraded, and the car was only 2 weeks old. And that was just because that capacity was really just trying, the battery management system was calibrating, and you had basically the cells all sort of settling into their settled capacity as well. And it was a bit of a mess. So it took a while, it took a few months for the BMS and the battery to settle in and to sort of have some real sort of consistent capacity figures on this battery. So my car's at 100%. And so we look at, for degradation, we look at full pack when new, and then we go to nominal full pack. That's the 58.4. That was 58.5 the other day. And minus that, or work that out as a percentage to the original 60.5, and I get 3.3%. So that was with ScanMyTesla. Now there's a lot of other info here in ScanMyTesla. Basically the car, I mean, if you had a bad cell in the pack, the BMS is going to find that and tell you. So really, there's not really much as a user that you need to monitor there with the battery. I'm just a data nerd, and I love looking at all this data and just seeing everything working and monitoring things over time. And that's all I'm trying to do, is just share that with you. Look, I'm not a chemical engineer, so a lot of this stuff is a little bit beyond me, but I just wanted to give you some basics here with the battery. Now, the other thing I used there was, what else did we look at? We looked at the range. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. When your car is charged to 100%, you just need to click there on the 100% shown on the screen. You click on that, it then gives you a kilometer reading. So at 100%, my car's now saying 422, but I mean, it was 424 the other day, and that's going to vary a little bit. So it's often good to just run your battery down to 10, 15% every now and again, and then charge it up slowly, just to give the BMS a nice good look at the full capacity of your battery, or close to full capacity. Give it a good look at the charge, the cells charging up from lower voltage up to full voltage, and that's quite good. Now I'm going to go through a couple of things with charging habits and that later on, but we're only going to sort of briefly go over that, because I think there's a couple of things there you need to know, but there are some things you do with charging that people are going to tell you, do this, do that, but there's really just not much difference. I think over the lifetime of the battery, those different charging practices are really going to make very little difference. So, in my opinion anyway. So the other thing I looked at, the other tool I have is TeslaFi. So we're going to have a look at my laptop screen here. Just make sure that my screen record is still working. Let's check that. Looks like that is still working. So we just go here now. I'm already in this tab in TeslaFi. If we go up, this was the charges. Then we can look at the battery report. So that's this battery report we're in here now. You can look at specific dates, but I've just left this for the life of the car. Now, every time the car charges to 100%, TeslaFi takes a snapshot of the reported range, that range figure in the car, and it's been taking that over the lifetime here. Now, this graph here is comparing my data, which is the blue line, against the fleet average data range, and it gives you an idea of how your car is performing against others. So we can also see here when it gets software updates. Now, I had a bit of a theory with my old car that I would get a software update and I would see a big drop in the capacity of the car. I don't know. I think that was when I had my Model 3, Tesla were really tweaking these sort of things, and they were changing how the car calculated that range. They made a couple of changes to that, which I think is what I was seeing. So with this car, I've had it from new. You can see my blue line at the top. You can see that stayed pretty much constant, which aligns with what I was telling you about before. You can see up to 2,452 kilometers. My capacity then started coming down, or my reported range at 100% started coming down. So the capacity within ScanMyTesla was actually coming down during that time, but the range reported at 100% state of charge wasn't. So this, I feel, is the battery finding its settled capacity. That battery cycling, establishing that solid electrolyte interface on the graphite anode, and that all sort of settling in, and the battery just, chemically settling in. You can put it that way. And then we can see now, you can watch that range just sort of drop away. So with an LFP battery, I mean, I haven't owned a Tesla for more than, I had my Model 3 for 2 years. I've had this car for 1 year. I don't own a Tesla with an LFP battery that's 10 years old to be able to predict what's going to happen. So looking at research on LFP batteries, we should see basically somewhere around 100,000 kilometers, I'm expecting to have 10% degradation. So that's what I'm expecting. So far, I'm not seeing anything here showing that I've got an accelerated rate of degradation. We'll get into my charging habits a little bit later, but we'll just finish this here. If we go down the page, we also get some other data here. We have my current range at 100% that the car is reporting is 422 kilometers, 422.26. Fleet average for this same type of car is 421. So you can see, look, I'm pretty much on par with the fleet average. We have the highest range reported by the car compared to the lowest range. So I've charged to 100% at times and it's only shown 412. So that is probably just due to the BMS being out of calibration and reporting a different range. It isn't actual degradation, it's just a capacity inaccuracy. So if we look at the lowest range ever reported 100%, we could say it's got 5% degradation, but we know that was only a small snapshot. A couple of times there we can see on the graph where my blue line, you can see I dipped below. I had this one time here, you can see 412 kilometers at 100%. So they're not really, we want to be looking at long-term figures for battery health and looking for consistency. So we have the starting range 434.52, my current range of 422.26, range loss of 12.2 kilometers. That's 2.82% degradation, range loss, which I would call that degradation because they're kilometers that are no longer available to me. But this is only applicable if I was running the battery down to 0% state of charge. If you're only ever running it down to 20%, 15% or whatever, you're not going to notice this range loss because that range loss is within that lower buffer. It's like you never run a petrol tank to fully empty. You don't run this battery until it just runs out of juice every time. You're going to be charging it at home in a way that suits your lifestyle. Now I could go and sort of graph this. It's looking at temperatures and things and comparing that. There is just so much data you can pull here from these third-party applications. I've never had any issues with things here. I quite happily let these third-party apps look at my data and run through it there. There are a lot of different methods of looking at the data from your car. Some people don't trust third-party apps and they will use some there are a couple of different programs. There's Tesla Logger, there's a few others there that you can basically set up your own Raspberry Pi, load in some software, and then get that to grab data from your car every time your car connects to your home Wi-Fi. Or there are various methods. Now I choose these third-party apps and software, so TeslaFi and Tessie are really all I'm using these days. I've tried a few others there that I wasn't happy with. Me personally wasn't happy with. It didn't suit what I was looking for. Now I use these third-party apps for convenience, and that's all. I find the Tessie app is pretty good, but I know there are other apps you can download in the App Store that do the very similar job. But that works for me, and you know, some people don't want to be paying that yearly subscription either. I don't mind. As I said, I'm a data nerd. I love looking at all this. It's worth the money to me. So yeah, and I've got all this history of the car as well. So if I go to sell this and someone asks me, I can provide them with this history. So that's pretty good to give people a bit of confidence in buying the car as well, if they're interested. Okay, so charging habits. We'll finish off here with some charging habits. Now, for me, charging habit is I charge once or twice a week only because I have access to a Tesla wall charger with 11 kilowatt AC charging at work. So I can charge at work, which is being fed from solar panels, and I've just run my car down to 20%, 15%, wherever it ends up on that day that I'm going to charge. If it hits 20% when I get to work, I know I'm going to be pushing it going home and coming back in. I might be on 5% or whatever. I don't like to run it down that low. I don't like to run it down past 10%. That's just me. There's no particular reason for that. I think once you start running down to like 5 and 2%, you then run the risk of one of your cells dipping down below that threshold of voltage and cutting out. So with a nice healthy battery, no problem, but as the battery gets a bit older, you just don't know. I don't think it's worth running the risk running it down there unless you really need to. So for me, yeah, I let it run down 15, 20%. I'll put it on charge. The car just charges down in the car park while I'm working. There's no inconvenience there at all. I do have a 240 volt, 32 amp plug at home that I can plug my UMC into. The mobile charger that came with the car, or didn't come with the car, came with my first car. I had to buy it for the Model Y. But I have a 32 amp adapter for that, which looks like a 3-phase plug. And I can charge at home, and that will give me 7 kilowatts. At work, I have a 3-phase outlet to plug into. We have, well, the Tesla wall connector is running off 3-phase. So there is 3 16 amp phases, or 20 amp phases, sorry, and the most this car will pull is 11 kilowatts. So you don't need a 32 amp 3-phase to run this car at its highest. The only time you would need a 32 amp 3-phase is if you had a Tesla Model S or a car that can run at that higher AC of like 22 kilowatt AC charging. For the 3 and the Y, the AC charging is capped at 11 kilowatts, so there's no point going above that unless you want to future-proof your charging setup. So yeah, that's what I do. So I'm cycling my battery from 15-20% back up to 100%. Now, I'm a big advocate of no matter what state of charge you put your car onto, let it go to 100%. And maybe not so much if you are charging every day, if you're topping it up a little bit every day. Maybe you don't have to go to 100% every time you charge, but I think at least once a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever, if that's your charging style, then just let it go to 100%, because I will actually try and overlay something here. If you look at ScanMyTesla when your battery charges up and gets very close to 100%, some cells reach the cutout voltage before others. And so you end up with this very big cell imbalance reading at 100%. Now, when you get up to those higher voltages, that's when the cell imbalance is really highlighted, because the slight difference between those cells means that they charge at slightly different rates, and that is highlighted when you get up to 100%. So when you get to 100%, that's why sometimes if you're looking in ScanMyTesla, you'll see it gets to 101%, because some of those cells have actually gone up a little bit above voltage, and you'll see your LFP battery getting up above 400 volts, which is pretty unusual. But that's just because some cells have been allowed to just go up above that 3.7 volts, 3.8 volts. They get up to there so that the slower charging cells can then come up to 3.6, 3.7. What then happens is once the car hits 100%, you will see that there is a very big, it can be up to sort of 200 millivolts difference imbalance in the cells. What actually happens then is your DC-DC converter in the car, which is charging your 12 or your 16 volt battery, that actually bleeds some of that excess charge away and then balances your cells by removing that excess voltage. That's what I've been able to see. That's not something that I've read from a Tesla manual or whatever. That's just my observations. And it looks to me that that's where it does the majority of its balancing. So that is just a bit of a passive balancing of those cells that happens after you charge to 100%. Now it takes the car about, depending on how far out your imbalance is, it takes the car about an hour of just sitting there after it's hit 100% for it to balance those cells. So I think it's good every now and again, every couple of weeks, when you charge to 100%, that you actually let your car sit there for a few hours afterwards, just to let all those cell voltages and the imbalance just wash away over time. I think that's quite good. So that's my charging habit. I think the LFP battery gives you the freedom to charge the battery how you like within reason. So for me, it works out just charging the car once or twice a week, depending on how many kilometers I do. If you're doing high kilometers each day or whatever, you might decide you just want to top up to 80%, 90% on a daily basis if you are charging daily, and then just once a week top it up to 100%. If that works for you, that's great. Now, I think just keeping your battery within a range of say 20 to 60 or 30 to 80 or something like that, I think that's just going to make minimal difference to the life of the battery over time. And that, once again, is just my opinion. I think a lot of the studies that I've read, these things just make such a minute difference over the life cycle of the battery that it's not a huge deal. With an LFP battery, they're only charging to 3.6, 3.7 volts, and you're never leaving it at 100% for a week on a time anyway. So I don't think it's a big deal to keep your LFP battery at 100%, or just let it charge to 100% if you put it on charge. That's my 2 cents worth. And I mean, look, my battery here isn't suffering any bigger degradation than other cars in the fleet, you can see from this data. So guys, I think this video is going on a bit longer than I really wanted to, but I really hope you've learned something here today, and you've basically maybe just got some reassurance about your car and the health of your car. And you can see here a lot of people say, oh, you can't check the battery degradation. I've just shown you that you can, just purely from the range displayed on the car at 100% state of charge. So guys, yep, I'm going to leave it there. If you got any questions, please feel free to comment. And if you think I've said anything here that's wrong, please comment as well. I'm very happy to be pointed out wrong. We're all here to learn something, and I'd really hate that I've given some sort of misinformation here. But you know, look, I've been working with batteries for a long time, and as I said, look, I'm not a chemical engineer. I don't design the battery from scratch, but I've spent my whole working life troubleshooting electrical systems, hydraulic systems, pneumatic systems, mechanical systems. And so I look at things from more of a troubleshooting point of view. That's the experience I've had. And I've really had to try and break down complex systems to train people as well. So hopefully I've done a good job with that today. And yeah, that's it. I will catch you next video. Thanks for watching.